The end of first grade to the beginning of second marks the transition from phonological to orthographic awareness, as children begin to realize that sets of letters can represent sounds. While many children benefit from on-demand or incidental phonics, the research clearly shows that many children in our country will have difficulty learning to read. In addition to a print-rich environment, these children need explicit instruction in cracking the code of how speech maps to print in English. On the other hand, they do not benefit from traditional phonics worksheets that are really tests or spelling lists to memorize. In the spelling by pattern stage, I tell children that they are word detectives and that each week we're going to explore new clues about sneaky or undercover words. That is, words that sound alike but are spelled differently, or words that sound different but are spelled alike. I tell them that when solving a mystery, detectives look for patterns, and that's what they will learn to do, spell by pattern. With each pattern, you will ask students to use their emerging knowledge of English phonology, sound system, and orthography spelling. In Writer's Workshop and in finding and analyzing spelling patterns in the books they are reading. These wonderful quotes from one of the leaders in spelling research summarize the three main concepts of spelling that word detectives need to master in order to become competent spellers and readers of English. Note that Henderson's last quote encompasses the 3 stages of word study that we will be covering in these phonics modules. Henderson's groundbreaking book is now out of print, but you have essential parts of it in your 600 course pack. The appendices will be especially useful for finding lists of words that follow the orthographic patterns presented in this module. As you use these appendices, remember that the number in parentheses after each word is the grade level at which that word is usually taught. Henderson's book is Teaching Spelling, 2nd edition, 1990. These are the 2 main concepts that word detectives in Stage 2 need to master in order to understand the clues of spelling patterns. Through many experiences with sorting words, discovering the patterns, and finding more examples in reading books, they will master this stage of spelling words as they write and decoding words as they read. Their word knowledge will be evidenced also in greater reading and writing accuracy. They will come to rely on themselves as word detectives rather than asking for the correct spelling of words they write. It will be helpful to erase the word rules from your vocabulary when you talk about spelling. Henderson points out that literate adults do not use rules. They simply know how words are spelled from many experiences with words that follow similar patterns. Talking about spelling patterns rather than rules emphasizes the fact that some words may not follow the pattern rather than that they break the rule. This way of thinking is more consistent with what we know about how the brain is organized. Our brains are pattern-seeking organisms, not rule-governed ones. An excellent reference for how to teach spelling by pattern is Fresh and Wheaton, Sort, Search, and Discover, Spelling in the Child-Centered Classroom from the Reading Teacher of 1997. This article tells how to systematically teach any spelling pattern and may be used developmentally in 1st through 3rd grade and for remediation of spelling and decoding deficits in higher grades. All of the accompanying spelling patterns are designed to be taught using the format of walking through words. Notice that here the model of how to teach these spelling patterns are to teach children to walk through words by first providing exemplars of the pattern that you want them to look for. Then you ask them to sort the words into the 2 or 3 ways in which that sound is spelled. You ask them to discover the pattern, develop wall charts with them, have them find more words in writing, and make up pattern stories. Now let's see how that happens. This and the following slides represent the format for teaching each of the spelling patterns in the Spelling by Pattern program that I've developed for 1st through 3rd grade. You would start by saying, word detectives. Today we're going to study words that begin with the sound of k. You're going to listen for the beginning sound of k. This is your first set of clues. Use the list of words and sort them into 2 bubbles according to how the k sound is spelled at the beginning of words. It is important that students be able to cut the word list apart and physically manipulate the words as they sort. One way to do that is to give them a generic blank table and have them copy the list from the board. Alternately, hand out a list in table format like the one above. Have them cut the words apart. Have one set of words for each pair of students. Ask them to work as detective teams. For best peer learning, ensure that the pairs are heterogeneous in their mastery of sound symbol relationships. In many cases, one will be better at sounding out words, and the other will notice visual patterns more easily. Be sure that most students can read all of the words used in the spelling sorts. For each sort, tell them how many bubbles they will need to sort the words into. Have each team of detectives sort their words and check if they have them in the correct bubbles. Put the bubbles and words on an overhead, a smartboard, or the board to have the children check their clues. Small whiteboards that have 2, 3, or 4 bubbles with a space for writing the sound at the top are excellent tools for sorting cut-apart words or for writing words from lists with vis-a-vis pens. This shows the correct sort for the beginning k sound. When children have finished this, they're ready to discover the pattern for when you use a C and when you use a K at the beginning of words that sound like k. So now you say, we're detectives. What did you discover? What's the clue for spelling k at the beginning of words? At this point, you may want to have the children begin word dictionaries based on sounds, not letters of the alphabet. This pattern would be the first set of bubbles associated with the tab k. Eventually, the children would also have words that end in k, as well as those that have k in the middle of the word. Students may come up with yabbats. These are words that sound like the target pattern but are spelled differently. Some yabbats for beginning k are Christmas, chemistry, chaos. You can put these in a separate box on the sorting page, labeled as yabbats. For this particular pattern, you can explain that these are Greek words, and that in Greek the k sound is spelled ch. So now they know Greek. Very impressive for young detectives. If they mention koala or kangaroo as yabbats, you can explain that those are words from the Aboriginal language of Australia, and that often when we import new words into English, we keep the original spelling. In step 5, you ask your detectives to extend the pattern by saying, good work, detectives. You learned that k can be spelled with either a C or a K at the beginning of words. Now see how many words that follow this pattern you can find in your reading books. Give them a time limit, for example, 10 minutes to add more k words to their bubbles and sound dictionaries. See which detective team comes up with the most words. If you have Xeroxed phonetic reading stories, you could have them use highlighters of 2 different colors to find words that fit that pattern. Book examples could be My Cat Can, Pat the Cat's Big Book. Another variation is to give them a wacky story and see how well they generalize the pattern to words that have not been studied, as well as those in the sort. Explain that some of these words are for much older students, so they may have to spell part of the word by sound, but should be able to choose the correct letter for the beginning k sounds. Here's the story. The cute king kissed his cousin. Cousin can be spelled C-U-S-I-N or C-U-Z-I-N, and kept the key for the cupboard. And cupboard, of course, could be spelled C-U-P-B-O-R-D. Now let's talk about a very different kind of Friday spelling test. On Friday, you would say, we're detectives. I'm going to give you words that I don't expect you to know how to spell. but you will know how to spell part of each word. You will get a point if you spell the sound pattern correctly. I'll also give you an extra point if you spell by sound for all the rest of the sounds in the word. So listen, today your sound pattern is k at the beginning of the word. Remember that we studied when you should use k to spell the k sound and when to use c. That's what I want you to focus on with each of these words. And you can dictate them with words like kennel, candle, keeper, kindle, corporal, and coast. I believe that this is a very important part of Spelling by Pattern program. This avoids the usual Friday spelling test of memorizing the word list for the test and then forgetting them on Monday. Children learn to listen for the sound in new words and use their knowledge of spelling patterns to make an educated guess about which letter to use to represent that sound. This will teach them how to fish, how to be word detectives for the rest of their lives. I believe that this sequence of spelling patterns gives children important insights to how a sound, phoneme, maps to multiple letters, graphemes. Pay particular attention to the open-close syllable pattern. This is the beginning of successful decoding and spelling of polysyllabic words that they will encounter as they progress through the grades. For resources to find words that follow these patterns, I recommend Program 1 Teacher's Guide from Letterland, the Reading Teacher's Book of Lists, and Henderson's Teaching Spelling 2nd Edition, the appendices. Note that in this sequence, number 2 and number 9 return to the basic pattern of open and closed syllables. As with the patterns for 2nd grade, it would be helpful to develop wall charts for each spelling pattern. Letterland Program 2 Teacher's Guide contains many suggestions for introducing these concepts in story form. This has been a quick tour through an important stage of phonics and spelling instruction, but I believe that Search and Discover the Pattern can and should replace traditional spelling programs. If you have children focus on sorting and discovering the pattern on Monday and possibly Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday could be spent looking for them in reading books, making personal dictionaries, and adding words to wall charts. Friday could be the time to test the understanding of the pattern by dictating unknown words and wacky dictations, giving credit for correctly writing the target pattern within the words. For example, after you study the long O patterns, you could dictate, "Once there was a boat named Joseph. He floated with smoke blowing from his smokestack. When it snows, Joseph has to go solo to tote his cargo." This concludes the module on phonics through spelling by pattern. Keep in mind as you collect sample words for sorting, challenge words for testing, and dictations to start with the sound and go to the orthographic representation, the letter or letters. For example, rather than teaching the rules for hard and soft G, present words that start with J and have the children discover when to use J and when to use G. I hope you enjoy this detective work as much as your children will.